I'm calling this a bonus chapter because line coloring and rim light are not necessary to know to complete the project. They're just some extra fun, stylistic techniques. We'll start with line color. It's a pretty cool, stylish way to break up the contrast of an illustration. You begin by cloning your ink layer. Drag it down to the New Layer button and you'll get a fresh copy. Then click the Lock Alpha Channel button right here. This will preserve every pixel's level of transparency on a given layer. I'm going to try a few different colors for my line art to see what best suits this project. Holding Alt-Option to switch to the eyedropper, I'll start by sampling the deep shadow color here in the gown. That looks pretty good. It's really similar to the black I was already using. Let's move on and try a different color. How about this lighter red in the upper part of the gown? Remember, it's all personal preference. For me, this doesn't work. I love the contrast of black line art, and if I get too far away from that feeling, it seems to dilute or obscure the details of the illustration. Let's try a totally different color. How about this dark bluish purple under the arm? That's starting to change the mood of the overall piece. Personally, I have just a single rule when it comes to coloring line art. It needs to match the art's darkest value. You can see with this dark blue, when you put it against the deep reds, it seems lighter, and that's a strange tension. You don't want your outlines to feel lighter than your darkest shadows. Personally, if I'm going to color the line art in this work, I'm going to use this deep red. And you can have all kinds of fun with coloring line art. I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I like to use a softer, rounder brush when coloring lines. So let's say I want to make some highlights on the ends of the robe. I'm going to lighten my red a bit and paint over that. Thanks to the alpha channel, it doesn't go outside the line. We can bring a bit more detail to the illustration by zooming in and changing the eye color of the character. Notice I'm not straying from my color triad. I'm using the deep red on the eye. If I decide I want to add multiple colors to my line art, I'm only going to do it in places that push the forms and the personality of the character. So let's say this crown is a real point of emphasis with nice clean lines. I could go in there and use the darkest blue and change the line color to match. And I'm going to go through and grab a dark gray to give a bit more character to the hair. All right, I think that looks pretty cool. Now let's give this whole rim lighting thing a shot. Imagine our elemental guardian has wandered into a mysterious space cave and has encountered a radioactive rock boy. It's just a hypothetical. The lighting in a scene like this has two things we have to deal with. First is the darkness. I'm going to turn off my old highlight and shadow layers because they no longer apply here. Next, I make a new layer and create a clipping mask. I'll name this layer Night. Then I fill it with a deep blue and move it to the top of my clipping mask list. Remember, it's still below the line art layers, so the colored patches on those remain visible. I'll deal with those soon. But first, I'm going to erase the blue where the eyes are. In cartoon worlds, eyes always glow in the dark. Next, I reduce the night layer to 75% opacity. This is one way to do it. Other artists like to switch the blending layer to multiply instead of lowering the opacity. It's really up to you. I'm going to change the hair's line art back to deep red. I want the textures of the hair to pop in this dark scene. Rim light is a color stylist term, as well as a photography term, for dramatic lighting that's restrained to the thinnest edges of a subject. But it's not just a line. Rim lighting needs to represent the subject's form. First step is to create a new layer and create a clipping mask. Now I set my foreground color to the color of the cave boy's glow. Now I grab my lasso tool, take a deep breath, and swing it around a region of the character where the cave boy's glow would be reflecting off of. Now I use the keyboard shortcut Alt-Option-Delete to fill this selection with the foreground color. Command-D to deselect, and now I just work my way around the design. I also like to think about what the surface is made of when I plan my rim lighting. For example, the stone in my guardian's chest is going to reflect light differently than the fabric of the gown. All right, I don't want to overdo it. It's called rim lighting, of course. Isn't rim lighting cool? Aren't you glad you stuck with it and watched this bonus chapter? All right, sad to say we're reaching the end of the class, so it is time to wrap it up.